Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for watching Hot Conflict. As the whole country and possibly even the world mourns the loss of these young students on the campus of Virginia Tech, we're starting to realize that this story is a little bit stranger than we thought. For me, I'd like to talk about how Islam has been involved, and Muslims, directly in the story. When the story first broke that there was a gunman on campus, many Muslims were somewhat alarmed. Whenever there's any kind of situation, we're always a little bit afraid of what might be happening and whether Muslims are going to get blamed or be the story for some reason. First you hear terrorism, then you think Islam, and all of a sudden the Muslim community is on high alert. Then the news came out, Asian. Oh great. Oh great. That's what we need. An Asian. Then as the story came out, we started to hear that, alright, he was a South Korean named Cho Seung-Hui, but there were still a lot of Muslims involved in the story. Even when the story first broke and I saw the footage of the shooting from somebody's camera and we saw the name Jamal al-Baghouti up on the screen. This is the footage that CNN ended up running. At first I thought, why is there an Arab guy? Why is there an Arab name on the camera? What does this have to do with... Oh no, I hope it's not Muslim terrorists. Let's not go there. Polls in Houston even showed that 60, 50, 60, upwards of 70% of the people thought that this attack was terrorism related. That's not a good sign for America, that we automatically jump to terrorism and think that it's probably Muslims or terrorism-related attacks anytime there's any kind of random act of violence, as Laura Bush termed it, random. But then even in the names of the students who were killed, yesterday at the coronation we had Professor Setki Riyad speak and quote parts from the Quran, so there was high Muslim presence there. But we've all heard the name of Rima Samaha, the dancer and the freshman, and some of the other names are also Ras Abdullah al-Madin, Walid Muhammad Shaman. There are some Muslim names involved, and so Muslims are featuring quite prominently in the story. Is that a good thing for Muslims, and how does that relate? People tend to look at this issue and think it's a terrorism issue. Who is the person? Let's get inside their head. Let's see how this relates. Yesterday, before we knew more information, many people in the press were talking about the kinds of religious attitude that he showed, comments about charlatans and debauchery and moral corruption in the United States. And this led people to relate this to Muslim acts of terror by radical religious elements. My point is to try and elucidate the fact that these feelings or attitudes that are being shown and as are coming out more and more each day of this shooter are not endemic to the Muslim community as we see here. Cho was not a Muslim. He, as we know now, sent a package to MSNBC or NBC and they released that today. Many people are looking at the images and watching the video. He quotes parts of the Bible. He quotes about his experiences and talks about how he is disapproving of the culture and society and how he looks down upon people. This is what we find many times in many Muslims, especially those who are young, those who are males of that age, who feel that they sometimes accept Islam or find Islam and they start to use Islam as their means for isolating themselves. They start to feel superior or think that they are rightly guided or they're divinely inspired, and they get grandiose tendencies and think that it's their duty to change fate or act out or take the situation into their own hands to make that dramatic leap where Islam or Judaism or Christianity or none of the religions call for anyone to go out and shoot innocent civilians to make your point, no matter what you feel is corrupt in society. That is an illegitimate act. And nobody of moral conscience would agree to that from whatever religion they may be affiliated with. So how do we understand this person, and how do we try and figure out what this all means, especially as Muslims? Well, we've got to understand that some of the press started to talk about it yesterday, that these kinds of tendencies come from people who are somewhat repressed and oppressed, people who haven't been able to express their views or integrate into society, people who for whatever reason seem so isolated that they haven't been able to cope with dealing with the outside world. A lot of times it's sexual repression, and we see that similarly in cases of Muslims who are involved in acts of terror, that they're sexually repressed, or that their extremist views leave them unable to interact appropriately with people of the opposite gender. Generally we're talking about males, but the same can be said, that they tend to isolate themselves, whether they're Christian radicals, Jewish radicals, Muslim fanatics. My point is to say that we're seeing here in this example that this is not something that is just a problem amongst Muslims, and that we as a society here in the United States have to start recognizing these problems, whether we see it in people of a Muslim persuasion or a Christian or Jewish persuasion, or somebody who's Asian that we don't even stereotypically categorize as Christian. Here the signs were there. He lit fires. He wrote in his plays about killing and death. In one of his plays he talked about being in a casino and being out there in a different lifestyle, while at the same time talking about how much he disapproved of society. These kinds of mental superiority trips. It's important for all of us to look for the signs and try and help one another and reach out to one another regardless of what faith we might belong to. We have the ability to make that difference, and it's important as Muslims for us to step forward. Now, once again, condolences go out to the families of the students who we lost, and we know that they're probably confused and they're praying right now. And as Muslims, we know that we never take desperate acts. As Muslims, we don't think it's our job to change fate. Fate is up to Allah. It's in God's hands. Terrorism is an act of desperation, an act of someone who is giving up. Muslims don't get desperate. In hard situations, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, you hold fast with patience and prayer, and you ask God to increase your strength. Just as the families are praying and they're confused and dealing with hardship, so is the family of Cho, surprisingly, wondering, how did this happen and where did they go wrong? And all of us have to ask ourselves, even though we know he's crazy, and even though it's coming out now that he was actually insane, and even though there's no way to condone his violence or his acts, when you look at his video and you see what his message is, you got to kind of feel a little bit sorry and agree with him that perhaps this really could have been avoided if all of us, Muslims, Jews, Christians, all of us who make up this society, extended a hand and tried to encourage one another, help one another, get along with one another. Maybe we could have made a difference. God only knows. Thank you for watching Hot Conflict. Our prayers and our thoughts are with all of you. Assalamu alaikum.